This is CBC Here and Now.
Visitors here from Quebec bearing a promise to reopen the Churchill Falls deal.
I fully understand the frustration and the anger that you have, that you feel about the Churchill Falls contract.
Coming up on Here and Now.
A grim anniversary. The province's Ukrainian community is marking 1 year since Russia invaded their country. That story ahead on Here and Now.
And liftoff of Falcon 9 and Inmarsat. Go Falcon, go Inmarsat.
A lot of people here today are excited because a lot of the work they do in technology is supporting the services and a lot of the solutions that are going to be supported by our satellite.
An international company with a large office in Mount Pearl played a role in getting a satellite into space earlier this month. Stay tuned for that story coming up a little later in the show. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. Well, the Premier of Quebec was in St. John's today to discuss the future of the infamous 1969 Churchill Falls contract. Francois Legault met with Premier Andrew Furey last night for dinner, and today they discussed the possibility of the two provinces renegotiating the deal before it expires in 2041. Here and Now's Mark Quinn reports.
Mr. Smallwood, the one who signed the famous contract.
Today, in public at least, they were all smiles. Two premiers who hope to help each other secure good deals for their people. But at the heart of the meeting is a deep wound. A contract that sees Churchill Falls power sold at 0.2 cents per kilowatt. Power Quebec turns around and sells for 35 times that price. The result, billions in profits for Quebec.
It was important, the recognition of what that contract means for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. The deep sense of hurt that exists within the culture and fabric of Newfoundland and Labrador because of that contract. The injustice that is perceived throughout society of Newfoundland and Labrador because of that contract.
Speaking directly to residents of this province, Legault offered an olive branch.
I think that this contract became a bad deal for Newfoundland and Labrador.
But when pressed, he wouldn't use Furey's word, unjust, to describe the Churchill Falls contract.
It's a bad deal.
Legault is here because Quebec needs hydropower and wants to continue getting cheap power beyond 2041, when the Churchill Falls deal expires. Legault said they talked about possible future projects and what could happen before 2041 and after 2041.
Et on va, dans le cadre de ces discussions, parler d'avant 2041 et d'après 2041.
When asked, Furey said he feels an enormous amount of pressure to get a good deal for Newfoundland and Labrador.
Of course I do. I mean, I'm not going to do a sure. It's been a pressure that has existed within this office, within these walls of this legislature since the contract was signed.
Today, the Innu Nation released a statement saying there could be no further development of hydro projects without their consent.
I've had good conversations with Grand Chief Rich. I spoke with him before the Premier came. I promised to speak with him this afternoon, and I will. And I'm meeting with him in person on Monday.
The premiers say they're not ready to talk about details right now. They say they're speaking at a high level. And Premier Furey says if he doesn't get a deal that's good for this province, he can still walk away from the table. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, meanwhile, the province's opposition parties are both calling for transparency in any negotiations or discussions, and they're calling for a fair agreement that would make up for the lopsided deal of the past. The PCs urge the Premier not to rush negotiations, while the NDP stressed that any new deal must include consultations with Indigenous groups.
The question we have is whether or not the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador is going to be open and transparent with the people of this province. We've seen too often with deals that they strike and contracts that they sign with people. It's after the fact that we find out what has been negotiated, and in most cases, it's been to the detriment to the people of this province. We can't allow that to happen anymore. So we're going to stand in the House of Assembly with the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and demand answers to the questions and be reassured that the best deal for the people of this province is being negotiated by the best team possible when it comes to negotiating the 2041 deal.
Indigenous groups have to be engaged. They have a vested interest. They're being impacted, and there's also land claims agreements just being negotiated. So they have to be consulted fairly, right? But at the end of the day, the people in this province needs to know that this is something that's for the entire province.
And as you heard, both Fury and Legault say they consider Indigenous consultations a priority ahead of any new developments in Labrador. Well, still with politics and people visiting the province, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in Clarenville last night. About 100 people showed up to meet him at the Royal Canadian Legion. As Here and Now's Mike Moore reports, the federal opposition leader made plenty of promises and received lots of applause.
It's great to be back on the Rock, here celebrating with you this wonderful province and relaunching our campaign.
Pierre Poilievre walked into the Royal Canadian Legion in Clarenville armed with a long list of promises that he says will help Newfoundland and Labrador. Poilievre traveled here yesterday from Corner Brook to bolster his support as he pushes to become the next Prime Minister. He promised to build more houses, defund the CBC, double oil production, and put a spending cap on government, which he blames for inflation. He also committed to cutting the carbon tax from home heating oil.
We put forward a motion in the House of Commons to say, listen, the NDP and Liberals want to triple the tax, apply it to your heat, your gas, your groceries, and everything else. But for God's sake, show a little bit of compassion and at least take it off people's home heating bills.
People lined up to talk with him and have their picture taken after his speech. A number of current and former provincial politicians were also here. Former PC leader Ches Crosby and current PC MHA's Lloyd Parrott, Craig Pardee, Tony Wakeham, and Jeff Dwyer stood and listened to what the federal leader had to say. Crosby said he supported Poilievre since his leadership bid and continues to do so in his race for Prime Minister.
There are an awful lot of ordinary Canadians here, including working class folks, including all kinds of people who are doing the same thing. Because they see in Pierre someone who's going to turn the country back to the free country it once was.
In total, Poilievre spent an hour in the Legion speaking with the people who showed up. But he wouldn't take questions from the media before leaving. Mike Moore, CBC News, St. John's.
It was a beautiful sunny day today. We saw some cold temperatures though across the province, definitely hanging in there. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see again that cold pocket of air pretty much extending across Canada, and lots of extreme cold warnings. So we still have those in place. Expect them there for a few more days, especially up across Labrador, but they're spilling into central areas of the province as well as the Northern Peninsula. A special weather statement for the rest of the island. And we actually have a snow squall watch in place for Port aux Basques. That's for tomorrow. Now, taking a look at the long range forecast, there is a lot more where that came from as far as those cold temperatures are concerned. This takes us into next week. See how it sticks around. We don't really start to see summer relief from that until we get into Friday, it looks like at this point. And we're not really used to these cold temperatures, these cold stretches of temperatures, not in St. John's anyway. Take a look. Last time we saw a 2-day stretch below 10 degrees was back in 2014. The longest stretch was 6 days in 1975. Looks like we'll sit around 4 days here in St. John's. I'll get into the full details for the forecast coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, the chief of the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary has issued a statement about the status of its dog therapy program. This week, CBC Investigates revealed that RNC leadership has been rejecting community requests for Stella, the support dog. Dozens of requests were turned down starting last summer. Chief Patrick Roach says interacting with the public was a valued part of Stella's training, but as the dog transitions out of training, it's only natural that her public presence has changed. The chief writes, the Stella initiative is still active and is currently focusing on providing internal supports for our membership. And for more on this story, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/NL. Well, in other news, today marks 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. The bloody war has forever changed millions of lives. The death toll is still unknown, but the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights estimates more than 8,000 civilians have been killed and more than 13,000 have been injured. Well, tonight, Ukrainians who fled the war and now call this province home are gathering for a vigil to mark the grim first anniversary. Here now's Heather Gillis is live in the lobby of the Confederation building. So Heather, what's happening there tonight?
Well, Carolyn, this is one of more than 40 to 50 vigils for Ukraine that is happening across the country. I can tell you that the lobby here at the Confederation building is absolutely packed with hundreds of people. Many of them are from Ukraine, and 1 year ago today they woke up to the surreal realization that Russia was invading their country. Many of them woke up to air raid sirens and attacks from that country. Now, in the year that followed, thousands of people have been killed in the war, more injured, homes destroyed, lives destroyed, families separated by the fighting, and also people left behind experiencing shortages of essentials like water and electricity. And it's estimated that about 14 million people have been displaced by this war, and about 2,000 of them, according to the province's immigration department, are now calling this province home. We spoke with 3 newcomers. We spoke with Oksana Makarenko, Irina Pegasina, and Hannah Furs about how they're feeling today and about the lives that they left home in Ukraine.
It's very hard because in one hand you're feeling the happy that you can stay in here, that you have the support from the people in Canada, that you can start the new life, but in other hand your heart stay with Ukraine. My family in Ukraine, my husband now in Ukraine. It's very difficult, emotional.
It was really scary, and I was scared about my son, and it was stressful. You're afraid any noise, start afraid any noise, sleep in corridor, close your window, turn light off. So it was like nightmare, so like bad dream.
When your country is in such state of war, and you understand that any day can be like the last, we hope it will be the day of the victory, of course, but anything can happen. You try to make something so your culture might grow and might bloom in some other places. So you try to bring it with you. So that's like we're trying to do here now with Ukrainian NL.
Share.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky today imploring Russia to leave his country and stop bombing his citizens. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says this country will do whatever it takes to ensure that Putin doesn't win the war, while Ukrainians here today say they're trying to build some community back, and this is an opportunity for them to all be together today on a grim anniversary. Reporting live for Here and Now, I'm Heather Gillis at the Confederation Building.
Well, we have an update to a story we brought you last night about 3 large abandoned boats on the Northern Peninsula. The community of Roddickton Bide Arm is under pressure to move these handcrafted wooden boats from the beach, where they've been rotting for over a decade after the men who built them passed away. Locals consider the boats part of the town's history, but the Coast Guard says they're potential hazards to mariners. It initially gave the town until today to decide if it wants to take ownership and liability for the boats, but now the federal agency has extended that date to June 1st to give council more time, and we'll be sure to keep you posted on what happens there. Well, in sports, it was a hard-fought battle today on the hardwood floor in Halifax, but the Memorial Seahawks women's basketball team came up a little short. The game needed overtime to decide a winner in the quarterfinals of the AUS Championships, and MUN lost a heartbreaking 77-76 to the University of New Brunswick. So that ends the season for the women's team. The men, however, play later tonight against Dalhousie University.
Well, we've got sunshine in the forecast, but we also have some snow in the forecast for the Port aux Basques area. I'll get into all the details coming up.
That's uncomfortable, and people just need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
The fourth and final installment of our Race to Dinner series, wrapping up honest and direct conversations about racism.
This weather forecast has been brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. Whatever you're up for this winter, discover experience packages at winterupnl.ca.
Wow, this cold. I put a sweater and coat on my dogs this morning to take them out for a walk, and they just would not do it. I tried to coax them with treats, and nope.
No, that's a good reminder though, because you know, animals feel cold just like we do. So definitely going to keep an eye on that over the next couple of days.
Keep that in mind if you have dogs outside, you know, they get cold, even in a cold car.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah. So they're not going to be happy. Your dogs aren't going to be happy anyway for the next couple of days, that's for sure. Today, no different. Let's take a look at the temperatures out there. Minus 13 was a daytime high in St. John's. It has been a long time since we've seen a daytime high like that. And those temperatures pretty much across the board, even up across Labrador. Cold spot was Nain at minus 30 today. You take a look at where we're sitting right now with those wind chills. I know I sound like a broken record, but the wind chills really are significant, especially up across Labrador and even across the island. Right now, minus 26 is what it feels like in Corner Brook, and then if you head across the island, even in St. John's, feeling more like minus 19 with that wind chill. So temperatures tonight are going to dip yet again down into the minus 30s up across Labrador, Northern Peninsula, minus 31 for St. Anthony, and then across the island, minus teens. This is where we should sit around for St. John's, but the interior and low-lying areas, Grand Falls, Windsor, around minus 27 overnight tonight. You factor in that wind chill because winds will be a bit brisk overnight. It'll feel like the minus 20s or minus 30s, and then up across Labrador into the minus 40s and minus 50s. And that will continue even through tomorrow afternoon. As you see, those temperatures don't really move much, pretty much across the board. But, you know, talk about wind chill. Other things like your pipes also experience these cold temperatures. Now, it doesn't affect the wind chill, but the wind brings the ambient temperature down much quicker. So your pipes could freeze, and this is a perfect recipe for that. So here's a couple tips. Just keep your house warm, maybe a degree or two warmer than you typically would. Also, if you can insulate some pipes that are exposed, like your garage or your attic, that's a good idea to do that as well. And another one that really works is to run a small, thin stream of water from your cold tap. That will prevent your pipes from freezing. And then another thing is to open your kitchen or bathroom cabinet doors, and it'll allow the air, warmer air, to circulate and prevent your frozen pipe. So hopefully if you do see this, these are some tips that can help you, because yes, the temperatures are going to stay quite cold. Now, just taking a look at the future tracker, there's not a whole lot to talk about except some onshore flurries for the west coast. Perfect recipe, in fact, for some snow squalls, and it looks like that will develop tomorrow afternoon, especially for the southwest. So Port aux Basques area, you are under a snow squall warning, snow squall watch. If they do develop, that will turn into a warning. But overall, sunshine in the forecast tomorrow. Temperatures between in the minus teens, but your winds will still be gusting fairly high, between 20 to as much as 40 or 50 kilometers per hour. So how much snow are we talking on the west coast? Well, we will likely see somewhere between 2 to 5 centimeters, but in those snow squalls, we could be talking about 5 to 10, likely 10 on the higher scale if you do see some of those persistent snowfalls. But you can see all along the northeast coast, even the Avalon, we could see a few flurries through the weekend as well. So our temperatures tomorrow between minus 12 to minus 14 for eastern Newfoundland. Again, your winds out of the northwest between 30 to as much as 50 kilometers per hour. That is going to lead to those much cooler wind chills. And the winds a bit more brisk than they were today. It was actually not too bad out there today. But between minus 12 and minus 15 as you head towards central, south coast of the island as well. This is where we should see some sunshine through the day. Can't rule out the chance of a few spotty flurries around, but the most of the accumulation should happen on the west coast. Temperature in Port aux Basques around minus 9, cooler as you head towards Stephenville, Corner Brook, Gros Morne into the minus teens, and then the northern peninsula really chilly. Minus 22 will be your daytime high tomorrow. Lots of sunshine though, thanks to an Arctic ridge of high pressure, which is what's bringing all of this cold air as well. Winds generally out of the west for Labrador between 20 and 40 kilometers per hour, but your temperatures are still sitting into the minus 20s. Now, we are going to see a bit of relief from these temperatures, the minus 20s anyway, up across Labrador as we head through the weekend and into next week. But I'll get into that coming up.
They feel like something's being taken from them, when in fact, we've been taking it all along. Like, we're actually giving it back.
All week, they've been getting really honest about racism. Our fourth and final segment in our Race to Dinner series is next. It's a dinner party with a deeper purpose to cut through polite small talk and discuss racism in a radically honest way. We're about to return to the Race to Dinner table one final time. This week, our guests have been schooled on white privilege, racial microaggressions, and how to advocate for people of color. So let's jump right in with a real-life example from facilitator Rachel Gilbert.
There was a family friend and they were talking with all the other family friends, and you know, I was here and everybody was predominantly white, and the sauciest the black came out, and then everybody went
and they looked at you.
And so, but I was like, what even is that?
You could use that phrase.
I never heard of it.
I've heard two different things about that, and I don't know which one is correct. The first one is the one
that we're all kind of assuming. The other one is that it's a reference to Black Irish, which are Spanish Irish. Ireland was colonized at one point by Spain. So I'm not sure which it is. It probably could be both.
Either way, it's
either way,
not a
yeah,
great
it's
one.
racist either way.
My experience is that you could use that expression against you if you were being teasing and being,
Yes.
you know,
So-
I could say you're saucy black.
So here's where...
Obviously you're not, so you know what that means, but
So
still.
here's where the issue actually lies in that sentiment. It's the idea... So when you're saying she's saucy as a black, that's not a compliment in any...
Well, in the context, it might be just a flippant comment.
Yes, but was it a compliment? Were you complimenting? Was that something that was said as a praise to someone?
Isn't that when like someone's messing around or they're saying something that it's
When
not like
someone's being-
you're not going to be
when you're saucy.
Spicy and provocative.
Yes, but it was never something that was said. It's not. It wouldn't be the equivalent to, oh, you're highly educated, or you're smart, or you're beautiful, or any of that. It wasn't a compliment.
You know what it is? It's like black hat.
Yes.
And there you go.
It's
the colors.
Exactly.
It's negative.
It's
undertone.
a negative, derogatory comment. So when we talk about when do you do something about a microaggression or a racist interaction, it's then. Your issue then becomes with the person who made the comment, and it's in order to create a situation where that isn't said again to someone else, you'd be like, hey, have we thought about where this statement came from for a minute? Have we thought about the history behind the statement, the intended impact of that original phrase? If the person's like, no, it's just something we said, well, let's take a second, see why it's not okay to say things like that. Let's look at the history of our verbiage, our wording, and why these statements came to be, and say that you could say this in a situation that does real harm to someone else. Because maybe she didn't react outwardly, because just because she doesn't immediately seem uncomfortable doesn't mean she's not going home later and being, that really sucked. That really, really sucked. And for racialized people, there's a tendency to just nip it.
Yes. And of course, depending on who you're talking to, there's different ways to call a thing out.
Yeah.
If I'm at work, I'm going to have a formal conversation. If I'm dealing with an uncle who I haven't seen in forever and, we're around a fire and that kind of stuff, maybe the approach starts, like, oh, wow, I haven't heard that said in a while, and then you kind of get into it that way instead of saying, that's a bad thing.
Exactly.
Right, so there's a different way, like maybe it's a more humorous approach. You kind of got to know your audience too, right?
But the things you do something, because doing nothing means it happens again.
And they just don't know.
Exactly.
So, it's just, now they know.
It seems to me that most sort of racism in the community, like in social situations and things like that, doesn't appear to be malicious to me. Most of the time, it just appears to be like my cotton picking hands. I just didn't know. But I do think that that's why I'm asking if you experience this. I do feel like there may be a bit of, in Newfoundland and Labrador right now, bit of, not resentment exactly, but like an anxiety about the fact that the pool of opportunities right now has a much bigger applicant kind of situation. The competition, the competitive field is changing, right?
Yeah.
And also, like when we want to correct any kind of marginalization, one way that we do it, especially if we want to like hasten the process, which could take generations otherwise, we may want to overcorrect a bit, right? So we might want to create more opportunities for a person of color or a disabled person or whatever the group is. And people not understanding that can resent it because they feel like something's being taken from them, when in fact, we've been taking it all along. Like, we're actually giving it back.
That's really
right?
true. That's really true.
I believe it is true. I believe that whatever we call this thing, this buzz, right? I think that it's an anxiety that you're going to lose a little privilege.
That's exactly it. You're going to lose a little privilege.
Something to change,
And I'm not going to say I understand, because that doesn't mean I agree with it, but I recognize how that can be uncomfortable when you've always had something, you tend to think it's yours now. You tend to take ownership over it and think, I deserve it. It's been mine for 5, 10 generations. I've always had this right. You tend to think it's a right of yours. Wasn't a right. It was something generations ago you took.
Yeah.
And it's now being like, hey, just in case you didn't realize, you didn't have ownership of this. So now let's make it an equal playing field. And so when equality and equity is presented when you've been a dominator, it feels like something is being taken from you.
Yeah.
It's not. You're just being presented with the fact that you didn't have the onus of this and you don't deserve to continue to monopolize the situation. And that's uncomfortable. And people just need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
The more you talk about it, the more I start to think, how often have I stood up? And I know I have. I know I have stood up. And I also know there's been times when I haven't stood up. And that's on me to do a better job. But I think the main thing that I really try to do is I come to something like this. I have open conversations when I can. I talk to my students a lot about not just race, but there's gender issues, and there's sexuality issues, and there's poverty versus rich, and I try to spend every time when I'm with somebody, in my world it's patients, trying to very hard, I'm doing the role that I was trained to do, here's your drugs and here's your physical exam and whatever. But also at the same time trying to be respectful and responsive to them as an individual, not necessarily, and to figure out what it is right for them, not necessarily for their gender or for where they're from or the color of their skin, but for them. Maybe that's the wrong approach. I don't know.
I won't say it's the wrong approach. But all I'm saying is that when you're doing what's right for them, make sure that you acknowledge what all of them is, and that we don't narrow it them to their gender or any of that. Think of them as a whole person.
Yeah.
And ask.
I learned a lot here.
That's good.
So that white middle-class male.
That's the epitome of power, sir.
Yep, you made me realize a lot about that. Things that never occurred to me because it's just the way it was. Like, I've never attended a university course and wondered if you were going to be prejudiced against me if I was in your, because I was white, and I'm sorry, you weren't. But I'm sure if I was black, and that might be a consideration.
It is a consideration. Absolutely. It's a consideration walking into any non-math course. Any non-based math course that has to deal with humanities in any extent is to wonder is what version of me are you going to profile? Yeah. And is it going to be welcoming?
Even having names on papers. I mean, there's studies done that they submit the same paper under different names.
Job application.
Like job application.
That is why you all get to meet me as Laura Bell. Because any other name would have a little bit of a question as to what am I walking into. Because I'm Nigerian by birth and I was born with cultural names that mean more to me than anything ever would. And it took till second year of university till I felt comfortable answering to Laura Bell because I did not resonate with that name. I have now built it to encompass all of who I am. But for the most of the people who know me in settings that are not always professional, know me as Ifanaya. That is what my parents gave birth to. That is who went through elementary school, high school, and started university. But that is not whoever has applied for a job and gotten it. But Anne, I'd like to question and ask you how you felt you've been an ally, if you have been, and if you haven't, what has prevented you before we go?
Okay, first of all, I certainly am positionally, like internally.
Yeah.
I'm in a learning process of how best to externalize that, as in some of the questions I asked you earlier. I do a lot of reading of the work of Black authors on like everything from fiction, which can be really informative anyway, because you get inside somebody's head,
yes,
right? So there's all that. And like in my work with the Social Justice Co-op, I'm always adjacently with a very diverse group of people. And the best way sometimes to get to know and understand people is just be with them. I know that Anti-Racism NL has a Facebook page where there's always suggested reading and stuff. And I just find that a really rich way of learning myself personally.
I want to thank you guys. One, this was not a comfortable situation for you guys, I can assume. But
Oh, it was okay.
Well, I'm glad, George.
I got white privilege. I'm fine.
You did fine. But I want to thank you for being vulnerable and being open to having these conversations. And then the one request I have for you is that you don't leave this conversation here and walk off and say that's the end. As you go home to your spaces, to the people you love and the people you deal with every day, have these conversations, because we won't always be in the positions.
Talk about it. I mean, you gotta start somewhere.
So
let's
like,
talk about it,
it happens in spaces where it's predominantly white people, so be the voice when we're not in those spaces to advocate for ourselves.
Exactly.
That's what we ask.
The show now that you've been listening to for years at this time on CBC Radio is no longer Crosstalk. It's now The Signal.
Yes, CBC Radio 1 launched a new name for its lunchtime show today. Hear all about it from host Adam Walsh coming up.
Hi, I'm Adam Walsh, host and producer of The Signal. That's right, lunchtime radio in Newfoundland and Labrador, it has a new name. It's no longer going to be called Crosstalk because the new name is meant to better reflect the direction of the show. So The Signal, yeah, it's a nod to Marconi and the wireless history we have here in this province, and it's also meant to be a beacon to connect the diverse communities and people of this province, because that's the underlying vision for this show. It's connecting people with a lens of empathy. Now, if you're a Crosstalk listener, don't worry, gardening is still here. It's not going anywhere. We're still doing a call-in, but some of those changes you've noticed over the last few weeks and months, there might be some more of those to bring in. And we had the launch for the show today here at the Rooms, and I want you to just check out some of the highlights.
Have an attitude of gratitude with that saucy attitude. Be happy for what each new day brings.
When the swinging bells were playing, we saw a bunch of kids running the stairs, young people. What is that like when you see that? What's it like for you to see everyone?
Oh, I love it. To have this space animated like you're doing today is, I think, one of the things that we've been focusing on as well, is looking at is not only the gallery spaces, but it's our programming, the diversity in our programming as well. And particularly with young children, our education programs provide that opportunity. You start them young, and then hopefully they become lifelong supporters and want to be a part of what we do here.
You've got a thing coming up tonight. Tell us about it.
Yes, I do. We have ANC's Black History Celebration. Our theme this year is on strength and perseverance. And it's basically, we chose that because we wanted to demonstrate a bit about the strength and perseverance of Black people throughout history. You know, from the courageous leaders of the civil rights movement to the trailblazing artists and intellects, that have enriched our culture. So even the everyday hero who lives in our community.
You've got some art here.
Yes, I do. My show, Tukey and Awaken, is on display at the 4th floor here now at the Rooms, and it'll be here till April 2nd.
So Tukey and Awaken depicts cool, interesting, funky Indigenous people from the artists is in your life. Tell us some of who's involved with these paintings.
They're just people from my circle.
Yeah.
They're my brothers and my sisters and my cousins, as well as other artists I know, dancers, musicians, doctors. The genesis behind the show and the whole purpose of the show is that, like you said, Indigenous people are cool, and we're not stereotypes. A lot of people think of Indigenous people as a people of the past, or only think you're Indigenous when you're in full regalia at powwow and stuff. And yes, regalia at powwow is an important part, but I want to show contemporary Indigenous people who are from all walks of life doing all kinds of interesting, exciting things.
Well, earlier this week, we told you about Inmarsat's satellite that made its way to space last week. Well, yesterday, the company hosted a little launch party to celebrate the office's role in getting the communications satellite into orbit. Here now's Jeremy Eaton was there.
And liftoff of Falcon 9 and Inmarsat. Go Falcon, go Inmarsat.
Today's been a really exciting day because we've had the opportunity to have a big celebration on a big milestone of our latest satellite launch. So a lot of people here today are excited because a lot of the work they do in technology is supporting the services and a lot of the solutions that are going to be supported by our satellite.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
I think it's an amazing feat for us. So we are the global leader in satellite communications, so this gives us a lot more capabilities, has opened up more markets, and continues to show our investment in satellite.
Payload separation confirmed.
Inmarsat I-6F2 is drifting away from Falcon 9's second stage out in space.
We're all so proud of what we do here every day, and to see how that's connected to the world and how we here in St. John's are making a difference. I mean, we're making sure that people at sea are safe, we're making sure that you have connectivity wherever you go. We're reaching down into poor communities in Africa. Like, we are reaching everywhere, and it's just amazing to be a part of that journey.
Kind of shocks me that my friends and that don't know of it, but a beluga airline drops in and they go, wow, you work for Inmarsat, don't you? So I spend most of my life explaining to friends and family who Inmarsat is and what it does.
We're in 40 different countries. We're everywhere. Being a part of this company, we get to travel too, but you don't realize that we're just this little place in Donovan's Industrial Park that no one knows about. Satellite dish out front,
but no one's curious of, I wonder what's going on inside there.
We're out here in Donovan's. People don't necessarily know what they do. They pass by us every day, and they don't understand the kind of technology and the kind of things we're doing globally here, and the kind of people we have here who are running, you know, very significant parts of the Inmarsat business, are a big part of the Inmarsat culture, and have been here for many years, just operating and doing and working. So it's kind of been under the radar, so to speak.
And there you've seen it. We have second engine start.
I personally run teams here, London, Norway, and in Batam, Indonesia. We follow the sun. We're one of the top adopters of global cloud in the world. So we're at about 92% of our corporate IT in the cloud. We operate a pretty big, innovative team here.
All of us here at SpaceX want to thank our customer Inmarsat for entrusting us with tonight's mission.
Be able to work from home and be able to work with one of the most innovative companies that's in the satellite business and space industries, that's a really unique opportunity.
And liftoff of Falcon 9 and Inmarsat.
Let's find out who's celebrating. Happy anniversary to Bob and Bun Vincent. They're celebrating 52 years of marriage. Happy 67th anniversary to Wilbur and Betty Moss of Gander. Wishing Jim and Betty Cooper of St. John's a happy 52nd anniversary. Happy 60th anniversary to Jack and Beatrice Han of Burgeo. Congratulations to Norman and Helen Kendall from Morrisville, Bay d'Espere, who are marking 60 years of marriage. Happy 60th anniversary also to Lily and Joe Clark in Bishop's Cove. Anniversary greetings going out to Everett and Olga Gregory from Lewisport. They've been married for 68 years. Happy anniversary to Leslie and Ruth Roberts of St. Paul's River in Quebec. They're celebrating 57 years of marriage. Happy 57th anniversary to Wilfred and Georgina Kinsella of St. Anthony, now living in Deer Lake. Wishing Annie and Doug Marsden of Burgeo a happy 55th anniversary. Happy 65th anniversary to Henry and May Muse of Birchie Bay, now in Corner Brook. Anniversary greetings going out to Phil and Joan Bull of Southern Bay. They're marking their 56th anniversary. Happy 63rd anniversary to Guy and Floss Freak of Glenwood, now in Gander. Happy anniversary to Bill and Bonnie Bonnell of Pasadena, who are celebrating 56 years of wedded bliss. Wishing Wanda and George Glover of Wabush a happy 50th anniversary. Congratulations to Mary and Lorenzo Coombs of Plum Point. It's their 55th anniversary. Best wishes to Jean and Ron Ackerman of Wareham, who are celebrating their 55th anniversary. Happy 66th anniversary to Dinah and Edgar Wells of Trinity Bay, now in Gander. Happy anniversary to Baxter and Francis Boyd. They're marking 50 years together. Happy 50th anniversary also to Reginald and Jane Skinner in Main Brook. Happy 58th anniversary to Heber and Rowena Warren of Heron Neck. Wishing Calvin and Annie Poole of St. Louis, Labrador a happy 55th anniversary. Congratulations to Stanley and Gladys Powell of Stoneville. It's their 57th anniversary. Happy 54th anniversary to Sharon and Bruce Carpenter of Catalina. Now to some birthdays. Happy 90th birthday to Elsie Bungie from Seal Cove, now in Grand Falls, Windsor. Wishing Rachel Spencer a happy 93rd birthday. She's from Pass Island and now lives in Harbor Breton. Birthday greetings going out to Geraldine Hiscock, who's celebrating her 92nd birthday. Happy 95th birthday to Joseph Newhook of Norman's Cove. It's a 94th birthday for Marty Hill of Hermitage, now in Harbor Breton. Wishing Clarence Tuck in Clark's Beach a happy 92nd birthday. Marion Barney of Lansaloo, now in Forteau, is celebrating her 95th birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday to Dorothy Ross of Buren. She just turned 94. Birthday greetings going out to Gladys Cooper in St. Anthony. It's her 95th birthday. Happy 95th birthday also to Janie Riggs of Grand Bank. And happy birthday to Floyd Shears from Rocky Harbor, who's celebrating his 91st birthday.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. VIP prize deadline is midnight March 10th. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Oh, that picture of the beach.
I know.
Just then. It was like, oh, that looks nice.
It sure does.
Especially with all of these cold temperatures that are going to be sticking around for a while.
They are, but the good news is we see sun when it's cold like
True.
this. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Because you can dress for this, that's for sure. Let's take a look at the temperatures on Sunday. They are not going to move too much. Still looking at the minus teens. There is still a chance that we will see some flurries. It shouldn't accumulate to too much, but there's definitely the potential, but also some sunshine in the mix. So minus 10 rather to about minus 19 across the island. And then you can see those temperatures back into the minus teens up across Labrador, especially for the west and then towards the coast, still hanging on to the minus 20s though across Nain, and we're still talking about those wind chills into the minus 20s or even minus 30s up across portions of Labrador. Now, as we head into Sunday evening into the beginning of Monday, you're still going to see those flurries on the west coast. That should end as the winds shift Monday evening, but we're still under that ridge and or the Arctic air mass, I should say. So the temperatures are still going to stay quite cold. We may see a degree or two warmer, but overall between -10 and -16 across the island, and again back up to the minus teens across Labrador. So more sunshine on tap for you. But overall, we're still in that cold air. So if we take a look at the long range forecast through to Tuesday, that puts us in a 5-day potential stretch. And that will be the first time in nearly 50 years that we will see that in St. John's, or really the Avalon. So definitely a one for the potential for the record books anyway. But as we head into Wednesday, we will see those temperatures bump up, and this should start to get us out of these colder temperatures. But the minus single digits are still going to stick around for a few more days past that. So as far as central and western Newfoundland is concerned, I must say that is a beautiful forecast as far as sunshine is concerned, especially if you are an outdoor lover, to enjoy the sunshine and bundle up. And then for Western Labrador, you're still looking at some flurries. Same thing for Eastern Labrador, a lot of sunshine there in the forecast. And for Western portions, you really won't see the potential for flurries until we head into Wednesday. And the temperatures again are starting to warm up. So back, that's around where we should be sitting this time of year, and your overnight lows will be there as well into the -20s. Talking about beautiful blue skies and gorgeous views. This is a winter scene in Balleen. Lorraine shared that lovely shot with us. And if you have any, because I'm sure you'll have lots from the sunshine this weekend, send them to my Facebook page, Twitter, or email to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
And you're so right. So much to enjoy. And there's not a lot of wind either, so it is nice. It's just cold on the skin. I've been wearing my face mask, like my medical mask, sometimes when I'm out for a walk, because it's just, I don't have
a buff. You need a buff.
Yeah.
Those are game changer.
Yeah, so it works. Another use for the medical mask. Well, that's it for us for this Friday evening. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Good night.